Hello, friends. This is Professor T here, aka Wabuke. I had made a video before trying to respond to the question of whether Christianity is a white man's religion, and I think um, I answered that question. So I've recently bumped into a video by this guy, uh, Joshua Maponga. Apparently, he speaks so much about identity of Africans, or as people will call them, Afrocentric. So I'll want you to listen to the video and then I will do a quick comment about the video. So listen.
Walks into this village, the first, and make everyone in that village.
Let me start it so that you can see. Sorry.
Christianity and Islam, by nature, they are bullies of African culture. It is expressed in their intolerance of other people who believe differently from who they are. So here's a simple example. If a Muslim walks into this village, the first object is to build a mosque and make everyone in that village a Muslim. It changes your timetable of waking up. You wake up at 5, changes your fashion, changes the way you bury your loved ones. Now you must do everything according to Islamic law. The same thing is true with Christianity. Christianity walks into a space, first thing they want to do, as a Zulu, as a Xhosa, take off your shirt and put on your beautiful bits, and you walk up to church. Christianity will look at you, because apparently you must become European first before you can become Christian. In order for God to accept you, He cannot accept you in your authenticity. He needs first to take you through the culture of the dominant culture, which is the colonial culture, before you can actually become an acceptable Christian.
Okay. So that is what Maponga says. Maybe about Christianity and Islam. So maybe he could be right about Islam. But one thing I know, he's completely wrong about Christianity. And I'm concerned about biblical Christianity. So one, love to make a few comments. One, when he said that God expects you to be a European first before he accepts you. Now either Maponga here is lying or he is completely ignorant of what biblical faith is. Because if you read the Bible, nowhere does the Bible require you to subscribe into a particular culture before he accepts you. The condition of becoming a Christian is just one: believe in the Lord Jesus Christ, and then you'll be counted as one of God's children. Nowhere does the Bible require you to become a European or to subject yourself to any culture before God accepts you, or before you actually become a Christian. I also think he's coming from a point of saying that there is some European elements that came with Christianity when it actually came to Africa. And of course, there is some truth. There is some truth in that, and that will only mean that there was a problem with the missionaries who brought the gospel, but there was no problem with Christianity in itself. So to say that Christianity is a bully and intolerant is not just is just incorrect. Okay, I think the only thing the only thing that will prove what Maponga says, or what Maponga's point only proves, that the people who brought Christianity were bullies. But you can't say that Christianity is bullies you or is intolerant of a different culture, because Christianity is culturally diverse. Let me give an example. For example, if you come to this is Kenya. If you visit so many places in Kenya and look at how people express themselves as Christians in their own context, it's culturally diverse. Their mode of dressing is very different. The way they do their services is very different. The way they sing is very different. And it is also important to say that while there could be have some offshoots of some European elements that came with the gospel, And it is very difficult, by the way, to distinguish between uh, religion and culture, because the gospel is always received in a context. So maybe missionaries will have done a good job of trying to distinguish between culture and the gospel, because truly there are some cultural elements which are not necessarily unbiblical. So some of them are just cultural things, like dressing and modes of worship and stuff like that. Those are just cultural elements, and many of them are not necessarily unbiblical or unchristian. So a good job needs to be done in distinguishing between what religion is and what Christianity is and what culture is. And of course, that is not an easy thing. That is a difficult thing. Now, a friend of mine here is called Norman Major. Apparently, I've shared with some of my friends that have made very interesting comments here. So there's a friend of mine here called Norman Major who has made a very good point that I would just love to read to you. So Norman Major says that even though there are gray areas in distinguishing culture from religion, we should agree that unfortunately sometimes purely cultural practices have been demonized while posing no danger to the faith. Nonetheless, it is also relevant to point out specifically to Afrocentric critics of the faith that cultural imperialism happens even by African pastors against African culture. To say that all of that happens due to missionaries could be simplistic. Just like some missionaries did not know better, some African pastors similarly do not know better. So he says, so particularly I take a great number of Afrocentric criticism of Christianity to be marred with essentialism and overgeneralizations. For example, is the notion of a commonwealth of people living in the geographical region called African. Did the ancestors of our tribes think about Africa? Does such an absence speak anything about African culture? So he says that Afrocentrists seem to draw much from Diop and others who posit that Egypt is the center of world civilization and that Africans should see ancient Egypt their greatness, and though and through that reclaim lost or robbed dignity. Such historical revisions come with unduly dose of fallacies. Suffice to say that even though some disagree, such a reactive anti-Eurocentric view reflects Eurocentrism like no other view. So I think that is a great point, and I think the point that Norman is making here, sometimes the Afrocentric critics of Christianity talk of Africa or African culture in very simplistic terms, and I think he also makes a significant point here. I think Afrocentric critics of Christianity like Joshua Maponga, the mistake they're actually making, they are just anti-European or anti-Eurocentrism, and they try to merge that, and they try to merge Christianity in between there, which is not in there, which I think is not right. And I think that these issues should be assessed case by case. As I mentioned in the previous video about whether Christianity is a white man's religion, I said it is important for us to examine what Christianity is before we can make any conclusions of saying Christianity is a white man's religion. So thank you. This is Socratic discourse where we follow the argument wherever it leads.